to go and get some irrigation system from the Ministry of Agriculture at some point in time. So information sharing is also another very important one. I'd like now to have us all get ready for this very important presentation on making irrigation build climate resilient smallholder farmers. Once again, you can be able to scan the QR to get some of
the backbone of Uganda's economy. And according to the Uganda Bureau of Statistics, it reports that out of all households in Uganda, about 62% are engaged in agriculture. Irrigation schemes like Agoro, Olweny, and Wadilai. These were mainly established because the region basically mainly has only one rainy season. And when you look at the eastern part of the country, irrigation schemes like Doho and Chivimba were also meant to increase rice production. However, these schemes were localized and only supported farmers that were close to them. So farmers who were actually far away cannot easily access these schemes. So if farmers far away wanted to use these schemes, they actually have to come closer to the scheme. And yet, we see that the effects of climate change are widespreading countrywide. Now, we are seeing that the drought shocks have spread countrywide, and that it's becoming widespread countrywide. And in the different sub-regions of the country. So when you look at this map shows the state of drought shock among households as reported by the Uganda Bureau of Statistics in 2024. So we see that sub-regions such as West Nile, Acholi, Lango, Karamoja, Teso, and Bukedi particularly report higher prevalence of drought shocks, whereby we find almost 9 out of every 10 households living in communities that actually reported to have experienced drought across sub-regions in the country. So we see that sub-regions such as Teso, Lango, Karamoja, Ankole, and Bukedi consistently report higher prevalence of drought in the country. And this highlights that drought mainly hits the hardest in the northern and eastern parts of the country. For example, if we look at 2019-20, we see that 1 in 2 households in Teso, Lango, and Karamoja actually experienced drought. And drought, we see drought has consequences. Drought affects crop productivity, and it also leads to income poverty. So income poverty, we are looking at households that are actually living below $1 per day, which is about 3,700 Ugandan shillings productivity. So when we look at this graph, we see the dark blue bars show us the productivity of households that actually experienced drought. And the lighter blue bars show us the productivity of households that did not experienced drought, consistently recorded lower crop productivity, as we can see in the graph. And also, for example, if you look at 2020, the drought-affected households produced nearly half as much per acre as households that did not actually experience drought. Now, if we move on and look at this graph shows us that drought actually increases income poverty. So if you look at this graph, we see the blue bars actually show us the percentage of households that are actually exposed to drought. And the line shows us the percentage of households in income poverty. So we look at the graph, we see that sub-regions such as Karamoja, West Nile, Teso, Acholi, Bukedi, and Lango show both high incidences of drought exposure as well as high income poverty. And it also shows that poverty is mainly widespread in drought-prone sub-regions, because these are also the sub-regions that actually this graph. This graph shows us that drought is actually associated with income poverty. Nationally, we see that periods that reported higher incidences of drought exposure is exposed to drought. For example, if we look at 2015, about 15% of households reported to have experienced drought. And the income poverty was relatively low. However, when we look at 2018, we find that about 44% of households reported to have experienced drought, and income poverty increased. So this shows us that when drought increases, poverty also increases. So this shows that there's a linkage between drought and income poverty. Now, moving on. how has the government actually responded to the effects of climate variability? And we are focusing on drought because we are seeing that drought is widespreading and affecting most of the sub-regions in the country. We see government has actually increasingly responded to the effects of climate variability by focusing on irrigation as a key strategy to address climate risks in agriculture. For instance, early irrigation investments actually focused on large-scale irrigation schemes. And as time went on, there has been rehabilitation of these large-scale irrigation schemes. However, due to the regular occurrence of drought in the country, and we see that many farmers are actually reporting incidences of drought. So there is a need to change the technology to irrigation that is actually accessible by all farmers in the country. So the focus is now on micro-scale irrigation schemes, which is either solar-powered or petrol-powered irrigation systems. And government has also prioritized irrigation, targeting at improving the resilience of smallholder farmers in the country. For example, government has increased investments in micro and small-scale irrigation systems, and also the national development plans actually do emphasize promoting irrigation systems and also building infrastructure for irrigation. However, despite all these efforts that we are seeing, public investments in irrigation programs still remains with some major limitations in this country. Now, we shall look at one of the examples of the initiatives of these micro-scale irrigation programs that we are currently having in the country. And one such example is the micro-scale irrigation under the Uganda Intergovernmental Physical Transfers, that is the UGIFT program. If we look at this map shows the district coverage of this particular program. We see the program was implemented in the pilot phase took place in the dark blue districts, as we can see, about 40 districts. And then later on, the program expanded to other districts, about 95 districts, as we can see in the lighter blue. So the lighter blue shows the expansion of the districts after the pilot phase. And when we look at is this irrigation initiative accessible to all the farmers in the country? Now, we have seen that there is coverage of these micro-scale irrigation schemes, but we are seeing that uptake still remains low at sub-regional level within the country. We see that uptake is less than 10% in each of these sub-regions, as we can see. And we also observe that uptake is actually lowest in sub-regions that actually experience the highest prevalence of drought in the northern part of the country and also in eastern Uganda. So we see uptake is specifically lower in those particular sub-regions experiencing higher incidences of drought. And also, despite the wide coverage that we are seeing of these micro-scale irrigation programs, we find that the total area under irrigation is still far below the actual target, the national target set up by the government, which is about 1.5 million hectares by 2040 hectares, as we can see in this graph. We still find that even after the micro-scale irrigation program, which is the UGIFT pilot phase, we still find that the area, total irrigated area, still remains stagnant with around 2020. And again, we also see that the cumulative water for production storage capacity has also remained relatively stagnant, and it is also far below the national target of 280 million cubic meters. So we see that the progress is just stagnant. We are not progressing despite these initiatives that have been put in place. Now, I'd like to move on to the different irrigation program financing modalities that we are currently having in the country. So we shall look at both the external and the domestic financing, and also a mix of the different financing models that are actually being used in the country. So when you look at this graph, we see that water for production, water for agricultural production initiatives have actually become donor-driven. Domestic financing has declined, whereas external financing has grown over the NDP periods. If we look at the NDP 1 period, we see that financing was mainly domestic. But if we look at the NDP 3 period, financing has been mainly external financing for these water for agricultural production initiatives. And this also highlights the sustainability of these irrigation initiatives that we do have in the country. Now, let's look at some of the different irrigation financing models that are currently being used in the country. One, we have the government co-financing, which mainly focuses on subsidization of irrigation equipment. And this is being used by the UGIFT microscale irrigation program, whereby farmers actually contribute 25% for the solar-powered systems and 75% for the petrol-powered systems. And we also have the pay-as-you-go, which is being used, for example, by Mercy-Corps. This offers a flexible installment for the solar irrigation systems. And farmers pay 20% upfront, and the balance is paid over 18 months. Then we also have the micro-leasing, which is also being used by Swiss Contact, for example, in Uganda. And farmers pay at least 15% upfront for the water pump. We also have the irrigation credit schemes, which offers long-term agricultural loans. And this is being used, for example, by Centenary Bank on Bolton, Uganda. So Centenary Bank purchases the equipment from the service provider, which is Bolton, Uganda, and then the farmer uses the equipment and pays flexible amounts over a given period of time. So this is a mix of the different financing models that we are currently having in the country. But which of these models actually works best for our smallholder farmers? That's the question we are asking. And it is affecting agricultural productivity of smallholder farmers and also increasing income poverty among our smallholder farmers. And we have also seen that despite the wide coverage of these micro irrigation schemes or initiatives that we are currently having in the country, we find that irrigation access remains limited for most smallholder farmers in the country. And we have also seen that water for agricultural production initiatives have increasingly become donor funded. As I conclude, these are some of the policy questions for us to reflect on. One, is the irrigation dilemma for smallholder farmers in Uganda beyond financing? And secondly, what financing models can be scaled up for inclusive and sustainable irrigation in our country? And with that, I would like to say thank you very much for listening.